Attorney General Eric Holder recently announced a new drug prosecution policy that may have far-reaching effects on the war on drugs. Here with a legal perspective on the change is Alex Crate, law professor at Thomas Jefferson School of Law and former chair of the San Diego Medical Marijuana Task Force. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Alex, this new DOJ directive for enforcing federal drug laws in states that have legalized marijuana, what does it say?
Well, it says a few things. First and foremost, it says that the Department of Justice is not going to sue Washington and Colorado states to try and block implementation of the marijuana legalization laws there. And it says that pretty clearly. It leaves the door open that they might change that, have a different view in the future at some point, but for now they're not going to sue those states. It also says to prosecutors, as far as going after individuals who might open up a business for a marijuana dispensary or medical marijuana dispensary, that they shouldn't use resources to do that, even if we're talking about a large-scale business.
What does this new policy mean to prosecutions of California's medical marijuana dispensaries?
Well, I think that remains to be seen because this policy does tell local prosecutors that they shouldn't be using resources to go after folks, even if those folks are operating large-scale enterprises. At the same time, in 2009, people might remember, the Department of Justice issued a similar memo saying that prosecutors shouldn't be going after people in compliance with state medical marijuana laws.
But that remind us, that didn't really happen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really, after a year or two, things were back to business as usual. In fact, some people say that the Obama administration actually has been more vigilant in going after people who are operating medical marijuana dispensaries and kind of done more to interfere with state medical marijuana laws than the Bush administration ever did.
Is this a memo, going back to that 2009 memo that said very similar things, is this sort of a we're going to wait and see, or do you think people are really responding to this right at the moment, like, okay, finally?
I think it's a wait-and-see type of situation. I mean, this new memo does say a few things that the 2009 memo didn't. Again, it does clarify, unlike the earlier memo, that even if we're talking about a larger business, as long as it's in compliance with state laws and is regulated, very clearly by the state or locality, then federal prosecutors should generally not use resources to go after these folks. At the same time, the memo does say at the end, this is ultimately up to local prosecutorial discretion. So, will anything really change here? I do think it's a wait-and-see situation.
Well, here in San Diego, in response to the Holder memo, U.S. Attorney Laura Duffy released a statement which read in part, when enforcement is inadequate either due to an inefficient regulatory scheme or law enforcement efforts, and as a result of federal interest are raised to this office will act to bring individual prosecutions focused on federal enforcement priorities. So basically, it sounds like what she's saying is the need for states to have strong regulations so that the federal government doesn't have to step in. How do you think that compares to her rationale for the 2010 crackdown here in California, here in San Diego, of the dispensaries here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is similar, although I do believe that this focus on the need for local regulations may provide some space for conversation with Laura Duffy and city officials. My hope is that maybe in light of this new memo, her office will say, let's sit down, let's have a conversation about what sort of regulations that we would like to see in place and see if we can't get on the same page with the City Council about establishing regulations that would be satisfactory for her office.
Have there been other changes to state laws, increased regulations, anything like that since that first memo or back in the day?
Unfortunately not. And really this summer there was an effort to get some more clarification at the state level on regulations. And unfortunately, state law enforcement lobbyists in Sacramento opposed it, and it ended up kind of falling by the wayside. But that was before this more recent memo. And again, I do think that this new memo, if anything, should give an impetus to state legislators, to local legislators, to get some clear, tight, strict regulations in place where they aren't already. And certainly San Diego, we don't have strict regulations in place, and the state doesn't either.
Right, and you touched on this. Before Mayor Filner resigned, getting a legal status for San Diego's medical marijuana clinics, it was one of his big issues. Where do plans for that new ordinance stand right now?
Well, I think like most things, the political landscape here locally is kind of anybody's guess, right, what's going to happen, especially with this mayoral race. I do think, though, that the folks on City Council are all in agreement, or at least the good majority of them are, that we should allow medical marijuana dispensaries with tight regulations. The key is to just get on the same page and get something in place. And even though Mayor Filner isn't there to back it anymore, this new memo might provide the political impetus for doing it.
All right, law professor Alex Crate, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.